When we last left off, we were talking about the physiological truth, the way John Benet's body told time when words could not. Now, we shift our focus to the forensic truth, the story told by objects, by placement, by what was left behind. The pineapple wasn't just inside her, it was waiting on the table. And that bowl, sitting quietly in the kitchen, may be one of the most revealing pieces of evidence in the entire case, because forensically, it shows us not just what happened, but who was comfortable enough to make it happen. Forensically, the bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table is as significant as the pineapple in John Benet's system. That bowl wasn't mentioned in the Ramseys' account of the evening. It just appeared, this piece of evidence that didn't fit anywhere in the narrative they'd constructed. Patsy looked at it during her interview and said it looked weird, that she didn't remember it being there. But someone put it there. Someone prepared that pineapple, put it in a bowl with a spoon, and either gave it to JonBenet or she took it herself. Forensically, we have to ask, who in that house would have prepared pineapple in the middle of the night? Who would JonBenet have accepted it from without question or concern? The answers to those questions narrow the field of possibilities considerably, and none of those possibilities align well with the intruder theory. An intruder doesn't stop to prepare a snack. An intruder doesn't take time to sit with a child while she eats fruit. This is domestic behavior, family behavior, someone comfortable in that kitchen at that hour, engaging in what would have seemed like a normal interaction. Anthropologically, the pineapple incident, whatever it was, reflects patterns of late night family interaction that might have been completely normal in that household. In many families, especially during holiday periods when schedules are disrupted, children wander down for snacks, siblings interact after parents have gone to bed, routines are relaxed. The pineapple might have been part of a completely innocent interaction that only became significant because of what happened afterward. But anthropologically, it also tells us something about the family's need to control the narrative. The fact that they denied any knowledge of it, that they couldn't or wouldn't explain it, suggests that acknowledging it would open doors to other questions they didn't want asked. It's a small thing, a bowl of fruit, but it represents a thread that, if pulled, might unravel a much larger tapestry of what really happened that night. The criminal mindset aspect of the pineapple problem is that it represents uncontrolled evidence. When someone is staging a scene, trying to create a particular narrative, they focus on the big elements, the ransom note, the body's location, the appearance of forced entry. They don't think about the pineapple bowl sitting on the kitchen table because in the moment it seems irrelevant. But that oversight becomes damning because it's evidence of real activity that doesn't fit the constructed narrative. The person responsible didn't include the pineapple in their staging because it wasn't part of the script they were writing. It was just a remnant of what really happened, left behind because they didn't recognize its significance. This is common in staged crimes. The staging addresses the main narrative but misses small details that end up revealing the truth. The criminal mind focuses on creating the big lie and doesn't realize that the small truths they overlook will be what exposes them. Let's go deeper into what the pineapple timeline means for the intruder theory. If we accept that an intruder fed JonBenet pineapple, we have to explain why. What's the tactical purpose? If you're there to take a child, why are you stopping to prepare a snack? Why are you taking time to sit with her while she eats it? Why are you doing something so domestic, so casual, so completely inconsistent with the urgent, high-risk nature of what you're supposedly attempting? The only way the pineapple makes sense with an intruder is if that intruder was someone so familiar to JonBenet, so trusted, that she would accept food from them in her own kitchen in the middle of the night without any concern. But if such a person existed, someone with that level of access and trust, why has no one been able to identify who it might be? The pineapple keeps bringing us back to the same conclusion. This was someone in the house, someone JonBenet knew so well that eating pineapple with them at an odd hour wouldn't have seemed strange at all. And the person most likely to fit that description isn't a mysterious intruder, it's a family member. Theme 3: The staging of comfort and the psychology of post-mortem care. Now we need to talk about how JonBenet was found, because the condition of her body when John discovered her tells us something profound about the psychology of whoever was responsible. She was covered with a blanket that was described as neatly folded and brought up around her as if you would wrap a papoose. Think about what that means from a logical standpoint. Someone took the time, after everything that happened, to cover her carefully, to wrap her in a way that suggested care and tenderness. This isn't the behavior of someone fleeing a crime scene. This isn't the action of someone in panic or someone who views their victim as merely an obstacle that's been eliminated. This is the behavior of someone who cared about her, who couldn't leave her exposed and undignified, who needed to perform some final act of care even after it was far too late for care to matter. Philosophically, this act of covering her raises profound questions about remorse, love, and the capacity for contradictory emotions to exist simultaneously in the human heart. Can you do something terrible to someone and still love them? Can you be responsible for ending someone's life and still feel overwhelming tenderness toward them? The philosophical answer is yes. Human beings are capable of holding contradictions that logic says shouldn't coexist. We can love someone and harm them. We can grieve what we ourselves have caused. The act of wrapping JonBenet in that blanket speaks to this capacity for emotional complexity. It suggests someone who couldn't bear to leave her in a state that felt uncared for, someone whose final gesture was one of protection and comfort, even though all the protection and comfort in the world couldn't undo what had been done. We are layered, contradictory, capable of tenderness and destruction in the same breath. Psychologically, this behavior is what profilers call undoing, an attempt to symbolically reverse what's happened, to care for the victim after the fact in a way that psychologically distances the perpetrator from the finality of what they've done. When someone who had an emotional connection to the victim is responsible, they often engage in this kind of postmortem care. They position the body carefully, they cover it, they try to make the victim look peaceful or comfortable. It's a psychological need to preserve some element of dignity, to not let the final image be one of violence or disorder. For a parent who has harmed their child, this need would be overwhelming. The psychology here is dissociation, the mind separating the act from the person, allowing someone to be both the cause of and the mourner for the same loss. From a physiological standpoint, this kind of tender caretaking behavior indicates someone whose body had come down from the acute stress of whatever crisis preceded it. When you're still in fight or flight mode, when adrenaline is coursing through you, you don't engage in careful, tender actions. Your movements are rushed, panicked, focused on escape or concealment. But to stop and carefully fold a blanket, to position it just so around a small body, to perform an act of care that serves no practical purpose in terms of escaping consequences, that requires a physiological state where you've moved past immediate panic into something else. Maybe shock, maybe a kind of numb dissociation, maybe a state where your body is going through maternal motions because that's what it knows how to do, and it's easier than processing what has actually happened. The physiology here suggests time, suggests someone who wasn't racing to get out of the house, suggests someone who had the luxury of spending moments on acts of care because they weren't afraid of being caught in the act. Forensically, this staging, if that's what it is, follows patterns we see in family-involved cases. When parents are responsible for their child's passing, they very often cannot leave the child in an undignified state. They dress them in favorite clothes, they position them carefully, they cover them with blankets, they try to make the scene look like the child is sleeping rather than gone. This is distinguished from stranger crimes where the perpetrator typically shows no post-mortem care, viewing the victim as an object rather than as a person they had relationship with. The FBI profiler insight that Patsy referenced about parents staging scenes to make children look peaceful is exactly what we see here. It's not proof, but it's a strong indicator of relationship and emotional connection between perpetrator and victim. Anthropologically, the act of covering JonBenet reflects deep cultural practices around death and dignity. In virtually every human culture, there are rituals around caring for the deceased, around ensuring they aren't left exposed or undignified. The person who wrapped that blanket was enacting a cultural script about how we treat people who have passed, particularly children. This isn't the behavior of someone from outside the family's cultural context. This is someone performing a role that makes sense within their understanding of proper care, proper treatment, proper respect. The specific image of wrapping like a papoose connects to maternal caretaking behaviors that are culturally coded. It's not just any covering, it's a specifically protective, nurturing way of wrapping that speaks to parental instinct and cultural understanding of how we care for the most vulnerable. The criminal mindset here is particularly revealing because it shows someone who is not operating from a place of cold calculation. A purely strategic criminal mindset would say, leave the body, don't add your touch to the crime scene, don't create evidence of having handled or positioned the victim. But someone operating from a place of emotional connection can't do that. They can't walk away from their child lying on cold concrete in a dark room. They need to do something, anything that feels like care, that feels like the kind of parent behavior that defines their identity. This reveals someone whose criminal mindset, if we can even call it that, is fundamentally shaped by their role as parent or family member. They're not thinking like a criminal trying to evade detection. They're thinking like a parent trying to care for their child, even when all the care in the world can't change what's already happened. And that psychological conflict creates evidence that ultimately points toward family involvement rather than away from it. But let's think about this from another angle. Could an intruder have done this? Could someone who broke into the house, who caused JonBenet's passing, have then stopped to carefully wrap her in a blanket with tender precision? Logically, it's possible, but extremely improbable. Intruders don't take time for acts of care. They don't stay in a crime scene longer than absolutely necessary. They don't perform gestures that serve no functional purpose in terms of their escape or the completion of their crime. The only way an intruder wraps a child in a blanket is if they had such a profound emotional connection to her that they couldn't help themselves. But if such a connection existed, it would point us towards someone identifiable, someone whose relationship with JonBenet would have been known and documented. The tender wrapping of that blanket keeps bringing us back to the same conclusion. This was someone who loved her, someone for whom leaving her exposed was psychologically unbearable, someone whose final act was one of parental care because that's who they were in relation to her. And that someone was most likely already in the house, already part of her family, already defined by their role as her caretaker in every other moment of her life except the one that ended it. Where does all this contradiction leave us? We've examined how the chaos was manipulated in ways that reveal panic rather than planning, how the pineapple destroys the official timeline and points us toward family interaction that wasn't acknowledged, and how the tender care shown to JonBenet's body speaks to parental psychology rather than stranger involvement. The crime scene itself is speaking, telling us a story about confusion and love and desperate attempts to create order out of the unthinkable. Everything about the physical evidence suggests something far more complicated than a simple intruder narrative, something that requires us to look at family dynamics, at what might have happened in those late evening hours, at how a situation could spiral out of control and then be covered in ways that seem necessary for survival. Next, we're going to examine the human cost of all this contradiction, how the people involved tried to live with what happened, how they managed the investigation, and what their behavior in the aftermath reveals about consciousness and guilt. What this is where psychology meets real human suffering, and it's going to be painful, but we're too far in to turn back now.